Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. How you doing, Fade to Black? Yeah. Today's Wednesday, March 26th, 2025. Let's see here. I've got to, that's all I had to do. I had to click on something. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Yeah, let's do this, man. Very excited. Just an amazing week here on Fade to Black last night with Jacques Vallée. That was very interesting. He's going to be with us on Tuesday, by the way. Now, let's talk about this week on Fade to Black because Monday we had Kelly Chase here. Last night, talking about a new docuseries, Cosmosis. And last night, Jacques Vallée was supposed to be here. We had technical issues that have now been worked out. And he will be with us on Tuesday, April 1st, April Fool's Day. And that's not an April Fool's joke. We got that worked out. But last night, we ended up doing an impromptu AMA, AJA. And I'm going to say, last night was nearly perfect, wasn't it? I mean, for me. I hope it was for you too. Tonight, the one and only Isaac Arthur is back with us, one of my favorite guests and favorite people, and a very smart guy, physicist, physics in that world of science. But tonight, I've called this show ET Megastructures, which allows me to pretty much, and Isaac, talk about anything we want. And we normally go that route. We're going to be doing that. And then tomorrow night, Ray Hernandez is here for the first time. Many times over the years, Ray and I have been close to getting a show together, and there was always something that got in the way. But tonight or tomorrow night, Ray Hernandez is with us, and we are going to be talking about his academic paper, Beyond UFOs and That Study. All right. Now, I do have 5 major events coming up. Starting this weekend, I will be in Sedona, Arizona for the Rise of the Guardians. March 29th and 30th, this Saturday and Sunday, 2025 in Sedona, Arizona. Tickets are available. Links are below. Then I head to the Midwest. Yeah, for the Contact Modalities Expo. This is May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, 2025 in Delavan, Wisconsin, Delavan Lake at the resort. Again, everything you need to know is in the link below. Then I come back out here for Contact in the Desert, May 29th through June 2nd in Palm Springs, California. Then I go south, really south, to South America, to Peru with Brian Forrester for the Inca celebration of the sun. This is on the solstice, everyone. So I say it all the time. Peru is a paradigm-shifting, life-changing event. You've got to get your butt down to Peru, preferably with myself and Brian Forrester. Now, we do have 2 tours we're doing this year, one in June and one in November. Links for everything are below. June is sold out. If there's a cancellation or something last minute, we'll let you know and see if there's still time to get you on. All right. Then I go to the East Coast for the PSI Games, the Psychic Olympics. That's right, Jimmy Church. I'm talking about myself in the third person. Jimmy Church is a game show host for the Psychic Olympics, August 1st through the 3rd, 2025 in Charlottesville, Virginia. The links for everything are below. Now, Renee brought up in the chat, by the way, so everybody saw it. Hey, Jimmy, so how are you feeling today after the dentist? Funny you should ask that, Renee, because I normally book on Fridays dental stuff. Getting a lot of work done because I'm off on Fridays. Okay. It's not good to have dental work during the week like I'm having done, and then I can't do a show that night. So we do everything on Fridays. But this week I'm in Sedona. I can't skip a week. My dentist won't allow me to do that. So they booked me for today, which means I've got my good friend Isaac Arthur on the show tonight. And I walked into my dentist. I said, "Hey, I can't do a show with a numb face." Okay, all right. So she held it back a little bit, not much, by the way. I'm still a little numb right here, but I'm almost normal. But I thought to myself, what if? I mean, last week or the week before, I had so much Novocaine or whatever they use. I was numb for a day and a half. You need to think about that. That's how much. I was like, okay, more. I was numb for a day and a half. I think most of it was in my head, and but anyway, I couldn't go through that again. But I'm back to normal right before showtime because I needed that. For Isaac Arthur, he is back with us. I am so happy about this. About a month ago, I was goofing around on social media, and I see this post from Isaac, and I catch this post. He's going to remember it. And the post was so nice and so cool. He goes, "Well, yeah, and then when I go on other shows like with Jean-Michael Gaultier or with Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, those are the shows, and that's the thing, and those are the guests, and those are the hosts, and that's the thing." Blah, blah. I was like, "Man, Isaac, man," and that went a long way, and it just meant so much to me. I have been following Isaac since he first got started in exploring these bigger questions and ideas and theories on ET, aliens, our universe, and what it means to be human. All right. The future of space development, all of that, colonizing planets, spaceships, spacecraft. And it reads Isaac's ideas. Now, I'm going to say this. Isaac's ideas read like science fiction, but they're not. All right? He comes from another place. And his series, I think it's 4 parts. Well, he's expanded on it since. But the original series he did on the Fermi Paradox is a must listen and watch for anybody in our UFO community. Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur is his YouTube channel. IsaacArthur.net is the website. We've got links for everything below on our website and throughout social media. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black the one and only Isaac Arthur. Isaac, was that a good enough intro?
That was a great intro. Thank you, Jimmy.
I'm
reminding me of another of my own stories about Novocaine, but I'll share that another time. So
yeah. I remember. So good to see you, my friend. It's been too long, and considering how much stuff we've done together over the years, let's not wait this long. You're a family guy now. You've got 18 kids. I heard you got 18
at the
kids
moment we
now.
have 3 kids. So
Yeah, 3 kids. But we can't. Friends like that shouldn't wait that long. You need to reach out to me and go, Church, what's your problem? Is it something I said? Just reach out to me. Because that post on social media, I don't know what you were talking about or why you posted what you did.
It must have been something doing interviews. There's certain shows you go on that you're just glad to be on because you know that you're going to have a fun time and actually get to talk to a good audience too. So
that's what you said. Yeah, well, some stuff is okay, but it's when I'm on with Jean-Michael or Jimmy Church, those are good shows or something like that. So. Yeah, and I went, man,
it's when you actually look forward to it, because sometimes you get an idea like an interview on a show, like, well, I could stuck my foot in my mouth, or I don't know what's going to happen here, or the other ones you can just kind of relax and say, I know it's going to be good. You know, it's
Yeah. Well, okay. I've got so many things that I want to ask you about tonight and get this conversation going. But let me ask you this. This is host to host, friend to friend. I'm just going to put it out there. How are you dealing with being a star? Because in the beginning, it's a humbling experience. You know, it's all new and it's all
scary. It's growing. You get imposter. I didn't get too bad of an imposter syndrome about that one because I had some, but I have some friends who've got like shows where it's like, and they didn't realize I was an amateur on this topic, and now they think I'm an expert. I was like, well, I did know the topic I was doing, so I felt a little bit more okay about that. But at the same time, you're like, someone's going to pull the rug out from underneath me. This is going to turn out not to be true. But after, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, it sinks in. It's real, and it's what you do. And I try to, well, it's one thing I like about interviews. You're talking to one person. That's it. There's other people around, but it's a handful of people. I get the chat right now. There's a lot of people listen to you, but it's like having a conversation where some other people are watching, but you don't think about how many thousands of people that is. Because if you do, you're like, this is live in front of a stadium. And that's
100%. And but you didn't answer the question. How are you handling it? Was it what you thought it was going to be?
No.
It's a lot of pressure too. Yeah. You have that pressure that when you're invisible, when you're Citizen Arthur just doing your thing, going to Costco, no worries, and then suddenly this starts to take hold and becomes a machine that you didn't expect. And people are there, they support you, and the numbers are huge for you. I mean, they're huge, and now you've got responsibility that you didn't have before.
I say you can always cheer yourself up on any day by looking through the comments on one of your episodes and seeing how much your audience still likes you, even on the worst day. And you get the occasional nasty comment in there, but you get thick skin, and you keep in mind it's like 1 against 100 good ones. And I am lucky because I mostly do voiceover work, so I don't really have that memorable face. I maybe once or twice a year have somebody like, "Are you Isaac Arthur?" And other than that, it's like, no, they don't know who I am. That's good. So I like that. It's nice for you to go to Walmart and nobody knows who the heck I am.
Now, what about the pressure of being smart?
I think it's not about, there could be one from being smart. It's about being an expert on your field, right? There's a lot of pressure to not say stuff that's wrong. Because you don't want to be the person that people are quoting and be like, I still feel bad about like messing up CRISPR maybe 7 years ago in a video. It wasn't all that related to it. I just misstated what it was. And another one, I messed up a formula like a year after that on screen. It's like, I can't get rid of that now because YouTube doesn't let you substitute things out. And so you just put a little note on there that says, I screwed this one up. And I think it's the biggest way to deal with that one is never to get full of yourself and always to just remember to be willing to say, I don't know and I was wrong. And,
right. Okay. So, and you touched upon this. I am very careful not to speak on things that I'm not an expert. Okay.
Or at least to always tell people I'm not an expert on that. And you got to make sure they know you're taking the expert cap off on that. So
right. Because people want to book you or interview you because of your name, and then will ask you stuff that's outside of your expertise or your field. And I'm not comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And I am going to say something that's wrong. I'm like, because I don't know,
happens, but you can deflect back on. I mean, if somebody brings up something that's not really your own, you try to give an answer with the I don't really know this, and then you deflect it back onto a topic that you actually know something about. And usually, because it's you'll move on the topic, that topic, you're enthusiastic about that topic, they're happy to let you move over there. So, but I don't know. I think it's the worst thing you can do as like a professional exporty person in front of the public is to be convinced that you're an expert on everything. And it was a big one for me when I was getting into this and starting to get recognition was I am never going to opine while I'm wearing the hat, about stuff that I don't know. as though I did. You know, I might talk about anything the same as anybody else does, but not while you're wearing that expert hat. You get to be like, well, by the way, let me give you my views on all these particular topics, and because I don't know. And yet people all listen to you from an authoritative standpoint. You get that logos ethos with them, and they listen to you, and then that's not fair at that point to them.
Yeah. I think it's very important, especially if you're invited onto a TV show or a movie that is clearly not your field.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your name's going to be tied to that forever. It's better to say no. You know, if it's not your thing, you know, just say no. Back off. It's okay. It's okay. Now, let's get started.
Yeah, it's better to stay quiet.
Let's get
out and prove otherwise.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a sports question.
If it's not soccer, I'm probably not going to know. Maybe if it's ice hockey.
You know what? I 2 years in a row now, and especially this year, the TV series on Netflix, Formula One, F1, Inside Formula One, whatever. That is I don't know anything about Formula One.
No, I think.
But you watch that, and it's just the drivers, you know, and it's really well done. Well, the owners and stuff, but it's just so well done. Where you're like, well, I don't know anything about the sport, but I actually have an interest in it now, and only because of Netflix, not because. And I like cars and stuff. Indianapolis, Indy 500, of course, but I never had an interest in F1. But now I do from that Netflix special. But that's all the sports we're going to talk.
Yeah,
what's that?
There was one for us with Netflix was cooking shows, and I don't think he's with the F1, but he's other ones. Jeremy Clarkson, he has a farming show.
Oh, does he?
Yeah,
does he? You know, I liked Clarkson until he got caught on tape talking smack, and when that happened, it just kind of, I was like, man, he's kind of fake. You know, I don't know. So anyway, I'm going to start out with this and the James Webb. Last week, there was a press release that for the first time, officially, they have detected. They theorized of components before, but this time they have looked inside an exoplanet's atmosphere for the first time and detected carbon dioxide. How impressive is that for the human race to be able to do that? Yeah,
it's big. In some ways, because when we look at stars, right, they look like little dots in the sky, and when you zoom in on a planet, the planet gets bigger, like Mars or Jupiter. You just don't see in the picture. If you take a really good telescope and you zoom in on a star, what you still see is a big point of light. It's basically one flooded pixel on your screen. And then, because it's so far off that no matter how much you zoom in, it's still that dot. Those exoplanets are like 100th that size. And you're not really getting to see that thing like a picture. Those are all artist renderings. We're seen as, you know, which frequencies of light are getting absorbed. And so, to some degree, we expected to be able to do this because atmospheres have frequencies of light they absorb, radiation and so forth. That's carbon dioxide's big thing that makes it an issue, is it absorbs infrared light. So we start being able to detect things like that. And that's how we got all the spectrums for stars too. They had these or that lines that they absorbed, and that's how the names got all the weird ones like A, O, B, etc. that don't make any sense to most people, and they really don't. It was we can see what they absorb, what frequencies of light do they emit and absorb better. And that's how we can potentially detect atmospheres, but it's a big one because you're trying to look at something that it's like trying to look at a grain of sand over at the horizon and then something, as far as you'll be able to see without that, and then say, I want to be able to tell what tiny amounts of air are clinging to that grain of sand. Yeah, and that's insane. But
it's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's insane. Now, the other announcements, I think that's a really big deal. And it just makes me wonder what is next. If that is possible, and they continue to fine tune this, what is next? Well, okay. I mean, everybody's looking for evidence of life on an exoplanet. That's the big goal here. It seems that could be the next big one. I mean, we're fine-tuning this ability and finding the right planets to be able to look at. The other thing is, all right, I've got so much I want to talk to you about. It's one thing to be able to detect an exoplanet and identify it and catalog it, but most of those are detectable because of the quickness of the orbit around their host star, right? So you can actually see the transit, the transit happen. And which means they're too close to their host star and they're probably frigging hot, rocky or not, or whatever, the temperatures. So to detect something in the Goldilocks zone, now you're talking about orbits that are, 6 months to a year, like us, right? Because they're farther out.
It could be close on a red dwarf, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, there's always exceptions, and there's a buttload of red dwarfs out there.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, why didn't we luck out with a red dwarf?
No.
Why? Hold on. Well, why didn't we luck out? Because it could have been maybe 1 trillion years of existence instead of 5 or 10 billion years of existence. But anyway, to detect something further out in the Goldilocks zone, now there's no light, there's nothing else, there's no way to photo it, and it's harder to detect. And we haven't those types of planets are fewer in number than the exoplanets that are really close to their host star. And so it's not like we're going to find something anytime soon with life on it when it's 2,000 degrees on the surface of those planets.
I think it's not necessarily true that it's going to be fewer in number. It's more that we have fewer of these we detect. As you were saying, the way to detect planets is basically, are they really big, like a gas giant, so they wobble the star a lot, or are they really close to the star and hot, and we've got a lot of light reflecting on them too. Trying to find, you have every article, at least every few months, we get some new one where it says, we have found an Earth-like planet. And you look at the specific size, like, oh, it's Earth-like, it's 4 times more massive than us and hotter than Venus. How is that Earth-like?
Right.
But we're getting closer. We were starting to be able to detect planets that are Earth mass and maybe are not places that you would best bake goods on as opposed to live on. It's getting there. And when we start getting those points, we're going to detect atmospheres better. And at that point, I think somebody mentioned in the comments, is like with Webb, it detects near IR, which is great for carbon dioxide. Not necessarily ideal for oxygen, but for other ones, like trying to see if it's got an atmosphere, where you got something that's got UV, you can see magnetics better. And that might tell you if it's got a planet that can actually hold an atmosphere with a good magnetosphere. And all those things are coming up on the horizon soon, another decade or so of research, depending on how NASA and ESA and JAXA's budgets all turn out and what they set up next and when. But once we start putting real amounts of telescopes up in space, we will actually be able to start finding real planets that we might actually want to live on one day. But most stars are red dwarfs, and most are going to have planets. And I bet a lot of them will have habitable zone planets too. And maybe not be tidally locked. I think we probably were very lucky with this particular planet, though. I'm not expecting that you'll see as many life-bearing planets around red dwarfs proportionally as G-type stars. That could be an anthropic bias that we just assume we are the more preferred environment. But red dwarfs have a lot going against them as ideal places. But what they do have going for them is they live so long. They live so long.
It's so hard for me to, forever. And that's what I was saying. We did, we have what we have, but it's so hard for me to accept that in 10 billion years or less, our sun is going to be a lump of coal. Mm-hmm. That's like crazy. So no matter what, which means no matter what, 1 billion years from now, from today, nobody's going to be living on Earth. We're gone. We're gone. We're blowing this popsicle stand, Isaac.
Only if we don't take action. There are things you can do to keep the Earth habitable for all the way to the red giant phase, and there are things you can do to stop a star from going red giant. As well as more science.
a giant tow truck and we pull Earth out of its orbit?
Well, we could, yeah. It's a topic that's always fun to do, but what you could do is put some solar shades in front of the sun, just a few at Lagrange 1. That's the one that's right between us and the sun. And we might do this for geoengineering even the next century or so. And you just adjust how much light's getting through. You wouldn't even notice the difference out of the sun anymore. You're looking through a screen on a window. And you just decrease the amount of light that's getting through. Now, that would be good for a few billion years. At that point in time, though, you have to say, do I want to see if I can make fun and profit by mining the sun, star-lived yet, in order to take all the toxins, helium, and metals out of it, use those to build all sorts of awesome, huge things that we might live on, or build artifacts out of, and extend the sun's lifespan. It's got enough fuel to run for 100 billion years, and we could potentially keep fueling it back up off of other gas giants and stars. It could go on. I think we worked out one time for like a trillion years.
That sounds great, and it's going to get done. Something is going to happen. I don't know if we're going to build the Isaac Arthur class starship, and or starships, and we get 8 billion people on them, and we just jettison the planet. Is it that? Do we do other stuff? Do we move our planet? There's things that but no matter what, the sun is going to, die out. It's going to burn up with everything. And once gravity and force and pressure don't do anything for the sun, it doesn't have much mass. There's going to be nothing left once there's nothing on the inside to push it back out. It's that simple. No more nuclear fusion.
Left to its own in about 4 or 5 billion years, will go subgiant, then red giant, then half its mass will blow off into the deeps of the galaxy, and the other half will collapse into a white dwarf. And we could actually live around that white dwarf for another 10 billion years or so. So there's always options. It depends on what.
But without that mass, there's no gravitational forces to keep the planets in orbit, including us.
You'd have to move the planet, yes.
Yeah, we'd have to move the planet. See, I sound like I know what I'm talking about. I do.
Well,
I hear what's coming out of my mouth. I'm like, shit.
You're right. With less mass, the planet, but the thing is, we'd still be orbiting the sun as it blew the mass off because we kind of adjust along with it. But this is a period that's 1 billion years long. You can give little tweaks. And for that matter, when stars get all red giant, the planets they swallow up don't necessarily get burned up all the way anyway. It's thinner than thin air, and they can just slowly get friction until they fall into a star. They can end up on an orbit that would actually have them inside the new habitable zone, for instance, of a white dwarf. Not very likely, but it's possible. A little guidance net for it, you could tow Earth out and then tow it back again and leave it someplace around a white dwarf where you could live for a long time.
Man, maybe one day, I'll be uploaded onto a chip and I'll be immortal. And
that's probably more likely.
Yeah. And I'll be the captain of the USSF Isaac Arthur. Identify yourselves. This is Jimmy Church, captain of the USSF Isaac Arthur. Now, if that's the case, though, I'm going to sound like Fermi here in a second. But if that's the case, then any advanced extraterrestrial civilization out there would have to be dealing with the same things with their host stars that we are. And they eventually had to blow their planet too. And they're out there on starships just cruising around, maybe not even looking for other planets, just living.
Sure. I mean, it depends on whether you feel like being planet bound. My friend Fraser Kane always likes to say gravity wells are horrible things to be trapped inside. Once you get out of one, why would you ever want to go back into another one? And he's got a point. I think we'll make use of planets in the future, too, if we get out there and settle the galaxy. But there's a lot to be said about living on a spaceship. I think one of my Fermi Paradox ideas I came up with that was kind of humorous, called I call it the shoplifter hypothesis now, but it was the hermit shoplifter hypothesis, the hermit hypothesis. And it's the idea that you get like a Star Trek replicator on your ship. You got, radical life extension technology and automatic medical bay that can repair you. You got all your holodecks and VR and Wikipedia on board. That ship can self-repair itself and repair you forever. So long as it's got raw material and so long as it's got energy. And so you stockpile up on stuff and you hide out in the void, maybe beyond the galaxy, because at that point in time, the biggest existential threat to you is anybody else at all. So,
You're
so
avoiding contact.
Yeah. And because the concern isn't that they're going to attack you right away, but the idea is you've got two countries that can be friends with each other for centuries, and yet it wouldn't be unusual for them to go to war once doing that. Now imagine you having a relationship for 10 billion years, because you're looking at a lifespan. If I want to live for 10 billion years, you've really got to start pushing those actuarial table numbers down to have a chance of surviving. So at that point, like, well, I'd love to talk to this person and get to know them from a distance, maybe, but even letting them know I exist leaves a 1 in a million chance they're going to come after me. And if I'm doing this for a billion years, that 1 in a million chance comes up to like 99.9999%. And so it makes more sense to kind of sneak around, pick up resources where you can, and stay away. That doesn't necessarily mean everyone would do that, but that's one explanation of why civilizations might tend to just unglue themselves. They're not hostile to each other, they're not particularly violent or self-destructive, but if you got a Star Trek replicator that can make you a doomsday device, anytime you get 100,000 billion people in the same place, you are now dependent on the weakest link there, because that weakest link in terms of sanity or morals
could do whatever they want
to the doomsday device.
Yeah. That's one of the problems with AI.
Mm-hmm.
That scares. You know what scares the crap out of me about AI? Some doofus, the weakest link, right?
Mm-hmm.
Types in, okay, I need a recipe for a chemical to kill all humans quickly.
Yeah.
That's it. It's things like that. I just wing that off at the top of my head. And by the way, I don't think like that, but some people do.
Some people do.
And and
I guess the question is, the one upside is we always talk about like, oh, we'll have better energy sources, we'll have better spaceships, better weapons, whatever it is. We tend to forget that, that's not the only type of science. We do have social sciences too. And we have to make an assumption that with better technology, you also get better at spotting people who are 51 calls short of a full deck and doing things to help them, contain them, mitigate them, etc. So it could be that, in advanced civilizations, you just don't have people who are crazy. It doesn't mean they're not ambitious, selfish, whatever it is, but not to the point of being completely nuts. And so they don't actually have to worry about them getting blown up by the one person who's crazy and has access to the replicator, because that person just doesn't exist, or is so astronomically improbable that even that access still means the civilization doesn't have to come up very much. That is maybe me being overly optimistic, but we always thought of so many diseases as inevitable things that just happened, and then they got cured. And if you ask people back then, they say, well, that's part of life, that would never go away. And they're all things that we have just gotten rid of. And that could be the case for something like mental health too. Maybe you really do have advanced civilizations that truly are enlightened that way because they figured out how not to, let people grow up crazy. Although that has some incredibly Orwellian options on it too. You think about like being monitored your entire life, and once you blink too often or have the wrong thought, though, you had the AI alerts the authorities who come by to take you off to the Department of Mental Hygiene. But you might have that option as the only way available if you're in a civilization that says option B is this person has nuclear bombs, because there's several tons of uranium in every person's backyard. It's really common stuff. And they got a little tiny machine that can extract that, enrich that, and make a bomb in their basement. So,
putting your belief or anybody's belief about ET coming to Earth or not, let's put that to the side for a second. You and I have debated that enough over the years, certainly. But let's put that to the side. There is a lot of conversation going on in Washington, D.C., and not to make this show political, but certainly when you have Congress and the Senate and stuff being written into funding projects, questionings, testimony on Capitol Hill on what is visiting this planet, the talk of flying saucers and backwards engineering stuff happening in the halls of Congress. That's crazy to me. But
it's overdue.
It's happening. So with all of that, that is out there right now.
Mhm.
How are they getting here?
How are they
How are they getting here?
under known science? And again, I'm a skeptic on the matter myself, but if they are coming here under known science, they're doing it the slow way, which means they're coming by something doing less than the speed of light, and it's a really long trip, and they may or may not be organic. But we don't, we can't just take for granted that they're working the same rules we are. My usual reason for being skeptical about aliens is I don't think under known science that works out well for colonization. If that goes out the window and they are here, it tells you something about the way the universe is set up isn't quite like we think it is. And as a
Right.
result of that, that might include them being from a different universe, different dimension. It could be that it's really hard to travel from one star to another, but it's really easy to travel from one multiverse to another. That was called Sliders. It's a TV show in the 90s.
Love that show.
Yeah, it
Love
was a
that.
good show. I mean, it got old after the first couple of seasons, to be fair, but it was a great idea. And I know they overuse multiverse in a lot of sci-fi these days, but that could be an option. That you just find out that there are 10 to the 120 different copies of Earth that are identical to Earth, except for there's no humans on them. It's that close of a thing, or even bigger numbers. And now there's more Earth-like planets you can step through a gateway to than there are planets of any kind in the entire observable universe. If that's a true thing, and if you have the technology to do that, you do a lot of colonizing that way. You don't hop on board starships too often. It doesn't mean you can't, though, because if you got all those planets at your fingertips, you can fund quite the robust programs for interstellar travel. It's just that you don't use them for colonization; you're just exploring.
You're visiting. Yeah.
And we don't, we'd say, well, where's the alien coming from? Like, could be a pocket universe, could be a different place, could be a different time. It's once you start opening the door to interstellar travel that's not the slow way, then you've got a lot of options for it not being through normal space time anyway.
The interdimensional aspect of this, I agree with you. Where I would think, Isaac, that if they were doing that, once you figure it out, it's really easy.
Yeah,
I mean easy,
like
walking through. Yeah, like walking through a door. Kind of easy.
If that is the case, it throws out every one of my Fermi Paradox solutions. From the first episode, I mentioned that was because always my topic is if it turns out that it's easier to travel to other universes and they actually exist, that's what you do. Because why would you walk? Literally, in this case, 100 trillion miles to the nearest star system, right? When you could walk 10 feet and instead of going to a dead planet with no atmosphere around a star that you don't like, that has a year you wouldn't want, a day you don't want, and then you spend 10,000 years just to make breathable, why not just step into a copy of your planet that has everything that you want there, except for other people, and colonize that? And it's, well, you wouldn't. Now, once you've settled a million of those and you got the ability to just bring huge resources to play, yeah, you send your ships off to explore a couple planets, but only the nearest ones. You're not going to just keep going one more mission after another to other stars. You don't want them. At most, you might go settle another star system that's younger so that you can replicate your culture there when your sun does burn out. But you're still going to go there, or settle that one star and make 50 million copies across the multiverse of that planet, And that changes the entire dynamic. So...
Yeah, and now, okay, let's say they're staying inside of the Milky Way. All right, okay, all right, because we were talking about Avi Loeb before the show, and Avi said to me, I threw out this number, and he's sitting next to me, and he spins around, and it looks right at my eyeballs. He goes, "You're way off." I go, "What do you mean?" I threw out a number like 25 billion. I think I said 40 or 25 billion rocky Earth-like planets in the Milky Way. That was
like
the number
10
I threw out
trillion.
there. Yeah. He goes, no. You're way off. I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "There's probably at least 250 billion. And I said, "How do you arrive at that?" That's a big number, right? 250 billion. And he goes, "Look, we have 8 planets in our star system. How many out? Every star is probably going to have at least one, but how many have 8 or 10?
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at a number of planets in the Milky Way that's way exceeds 1 trillion planets. And so now as I get corrected by that, then he goes, Jimmy, and then after that it's just a percentage. You know, what small percentage of 250 billion has advanced life on it? Well, I don't know the answer to that. That's what he said. But even if it's a percent or a tenth of a percent, it's a huge number.
Sure.
And he's right.
That's the whole base of the Drake's equation, is say we get this number was so big. We do have to be careful of that, because it's probably, I'm going to guess 1 out of 10 star systems it has a planet that is reasonably terraformable, at least as good as Mars or Venus is. And that probably more like 100 has one that would be, I don't want to call it a cakewalk, because it won't be. Even Earth 100 million years ago would be rough for us to live on. But it'll be something we can do. You can cross there all those light years, you can settle that planet. Just for life.
So you're talking now. You're talking somewhere north of 1 billion, up to 10 billion terraformable rocky Earth-like planets just in our Milky Way.
I would guess that was probably more like 100 billion easily terraformable ones.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. Where 25 years ago, Isaac, that answer was 0. We didn't have.
That we knew of.
Yeah.
But I think, actually, I think 25 years ago we had already discovered 1 or 2 exoplanets. I think
four,
we just covered that.
Four were cataloged by 1999. In 1995 was the first one. Actually, depends on what
neutron star. We found one around a neutron star first, I think.
In 92, but it was never verified. The first verified one was 95. Yeah. I'm schooling Isaac Arthur. Wow. I'm getting pretty.
There's a lot of that. When it comes to like exoplanets, David Kipping. He and I had a conversation once out in LA. He knows so much more about that topic than I do too. So.
Yeah. But it's a fascinating subject, man, because it's another example of, you know what? We know nothing.
Yeah.
Our universe, we know nothing. Everything, it's week to week
14. It's almost like 14 billion years. I want to say 13, but it's like 13.8. So 14 billion years. And we've been at the science thingy for maybe 400 of them.
400 solid, 400 official years, but I'm going to go 1900 to 2025 is the big stuff.
And that's a big jump for them. We'd be more generous to say, let's go back to ancient Egypt, ancient Greece. They know what they were doing over there. They're pretty good about astronomy and thinking and logic. Yeah, it wasn't science, but it was getting there. So let's say maybe 10,000 years of serious thought on the topic, give or take, versus more than 10 billion. That is a 1 millionth of that period that we've been thinking about this stuff. And if we go by the 100 years, that's 100 millionth. We'll be pretty arrogant to think we knew everything by then. We might know everything within a couple more centuries too, though, because we always talk about, well, the universe is likely to have always more secrets to uncover. True, but maybe not core physics, like a chess game, right? All the rules are something you can learn in a quick afternoon. They're not that complex. You can spend a lifetime actually practicing it, but it's just not that complex. Or tic-tac-toe. It's got basic rules. You learn them, you're good. The universe might turn out to be like that, where we're almost already at the end of that. That doesn't mean we know everything when that's done, but it does mean we might know all the basic physical laws. But whether that's the case in the future or not, we sure as heck don't know them now.
This is where the debate starts, good people. Okay, this is where Isaac and I go toe to toe, because I tend to agree. But if you remember, I forget who did the quote in 1870. There's nothing left to learn. We know it all. Right? Remember that quote?
I know the one you're speaking of. I can't remember who did it, but yeah.
It's a brilliant quote. Right before the telephone was invented, you're going to pop off with that. But anyway.
We still use 99% of the same basic physics, though, from that era. So they did know a lot.
Yeah, no, there's some points. If you think about it, the steam engine and the principles behind that opened up so much in the world of physics and where we are today. Steam.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't normally think about that. But anyway, okay. I think consciousness is what we're going to learn from ET. All right. It's not going to be some physics equation. It's not going to be some new thing. It's not going to be this. It's not going to be faster than light, FTL. No. I think it'll be consciousness. And I'm going to back it up off of that. I think that's our next. You're talking about what's left to learn. Well, we still haven't anything figured out on what's going on there. But before the show, I brought up Paul Dirac and Heisenberg. And here's the thing. this is the way my brain works. If you look at Heisenberg's uncertainty and then how Dirac took it to another level, all right, which was all stemming off of this cat named Albert Einstein. But let's go where the ideas presented there about something being able to, doesn't matter, to occupy and disappear and reappear and around us, that I started to think about that a little bit. Where what if, I mean, E.T. would have to have understood these fantastical sides of physics thousands, if not billions of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And so the idea, not teleportation, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about anything that we use or think about today. I think it goes beyond that, where their engine, their propulsion system is about the desire to occupy a point in space and how to just go fap. Not a wormhole. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm just talking about the ability to move particles in mass or objects and swap spaces. And
Like
that,
Dune style.
well, again, that's folding space. Yeah, okay. But visually, it would appear to be that way. But that's where I think physics is saying that, the math is saying that this kind of thought process is possible, but we don't apply it to a mode of transportation for us.
Sure.
Or a way to, but that's the way my brain works. And I read, and these cats were developing these ideas in 1920, 1925, 1930.
Some even more than that. Like Einstein's teacher, or one of his teachers, was Minkowski, and a lot of the Einstein relativity equations are based around Minkowski's work. And something even goes back to like the 1870s, and for instance, they were talking about all these extra dimensions. The episode coming out tomorrow on my show is called Hyperspace and What We Know About It. And the answer is not that much because no one can agree on what it is, but we actually did talk about that topic coincidentally, and how they thought, well, in the 1800s, they thought everything had been solved. They thought there might be hyperspaces you could move through. There were a lot of stage magicians who would trick them, and they thought, oh, they must be using some kind of fourth dimension to tie these impossible knots or things like that. But as we said, with with Einstein got relativity working, they got rid of the idea of ether, but we never disproved ether. We just didn't need it anymore. There could be a fifth element, as it were, like that. There could be fourth dimensions physically, perpendicular or current one. And indeed, string theory tends to work off of that. I'm not a big string theory fan, but the math is good. And when you have options like that, you could potentially move through there, same as you can move from like one page to another. You think about a book, a 2D map, an atlas, right? If you got an atlas map and all those maps next to each other, you might have one page has Europe on it, the other one's got North America. You fold them together and you can just move from one map to the next, and maybe we're to Antarctica with one infinitely tiny step, because you're just stepping at a right angle to reality. Those are definitely possible, but those are the kind of the classic concepts. You'd be more of like a, how do we move things in a conscious mind over matter way? That would be cool. And I think we don't know nothing about consciousness yet. For all we know, it could be an illusion, but there are so many aspects to the human mind and the idea of consciousness that are paradoxical, poorly understood. Leave it up to debate as to whether or not it even exists, or whether it's something we trick ourselves into, or even that it might be some kind of evolutionary dead end or mistake. Peter Watts has this novel Blindside, which has us encounter aliens who have evolved beyond consciousness, and they treat it as kind of like a disease you get, and it's such a weird kind of perspective to think of. But we always took for granted that anything with AI that was intelligent like us would be borderline conscious. And you can have a conversation, even including about consciousness, with the AI these days, and that thing is not conscious. It is not. I know it can seem that way to folks, but there's nothing there that would qualify. And yet it can have a conversation with you about it better than most people can. In kind of the same way Google can have a conversation about something like that too. It's just smoother. It's a learned language model. It's really just Googling stuff. But that might be what a lot of things switch into with time, because consciousness is slow and it is not necessarily advantageous. Generally speaking, things that react or have reflexes faster will win. Consciousness is only good when you have time to work with. And it might be that a lot of things just, we don't make conscious AI in a lot of cases, not just for fear of what it might do, but because it's not beneficial. We already have conscious minds. You want something that doesn't take time to think about things. And our conscious mind is such a tiny tip of our iceberg. Our bandwidth is so low. Our brains still match supercomputers, and they use a lot less power to do it, right? Those supercomputers are roughly human intelligence nowadays that we talk about for processing speed. They use like a megawatt reactor to power themselves. We use
but you're right. I mean, you're right on the page. You're right in the black and white aspect of this, in the logistical aspect of it. But I don't want to say you're wrong, but where humans falter is that we need sleep. We need to think about life. We need to eat food. We need to go to the bathroom. We need to take showers. We've got to do all of that stuff where AI doesn't need to do any of that. And so when and one basic circuit, and you measure it and how fast we are thinking from one point to another in our brain, and what it takes to calculate how much we can do. Yeah. Okay. So we can compare to the speeds of a computer, but we're not nearly as powerful as a server farm full of AI. That's a whole different thing. And you can have my one brain, but 30,000 of them working on something all at the same time, and do work in minutes instead of years.
We do have to be careful though, because again, we're talking conscious mind. How fast is human speech? It's basically in the like a slow modem. It's a kilobyte a second absolute tops that we really deal with in terms of and that's about how fast we think consciously too. We speak about as fast as we think.
Why? Because we're thinking about. You know why? Because we're thinking about other stuff at the same time too.
Sure. At a conscious level, when we tell a calculator to calculate something, we've programmed that to use the most efficient route to calculate. When we do, it's more like, I want to get this answer, so I'm going to grow an entire field of wheat, mow it down, bake it into one loaf of bread, because what I need is one loaf of bread. That's basically how we solve math problems. We throw an insane amount of brain power at
it. and are thinking about an ice cream sandwich in between. Right.
While you're still processing all the gigabytes of information.
While you're still processing. While you're still processing. But going back to this approach though, a lot of the descriptions that we have had, both in an official military capacity or a professional observer, I should say, to other independent people, and myself included, which I have seen with my own eyes, that this stuff comes and goes in front of you. A helicopter doesn't come and go in front of you. An airplane doesn't. You can watch the airplane fly across the sky. You can watch its contrails. You can watch, that's all slow motion stuff. But when you see these other things that appear and disappear, but for a moment they are in front of you, I have a hard time explaining that is something Earth made, and I'm misidentifying what I am seeing in my brain isn't computing. No, I don't think that is the case. I think it's coming in briefly for a moment, and then leaving. I don't have another way to explain it, but it's not from this Earth. It's not. It's simply. It's not our technology, Isaac.
It doesn't have to be. I mean, again, it could be. One thing I always emphasize is, just because I don't know what something is doesn't mean it is necessarily what somebody thinks it is. But it also doesn't mean that I knew what it was either. People will show me this or that photograph and I say, well, do you know what that is? I have no idea what that is. Well, I can give you a few mundane things it might be, but that doesn't mean that that's what it is. As I remind people, a lot of times the weather balloon really is a weather balloon. We release so many of them. But at the same time, it doesn't mean it is. It just means that's what it could be. For something really fast like that going through someone's sight, you could have a cosmic ray hit your eyeball. This happens up in space all the time, and it will trickle your eye. It's, just goes through and you see flicker of light. Not saying that's what that was, obviously, but you have visual phenomena that people can see and won't get recorded. And if you tell them, well, that didn't really happen, it's not recorded, they're going to very logically say, well, you're full of it, I saw it.
Right.
And you're right to do that to some degree, because if you start doubting, like, you have to work from the assumption that what you see is valid and real. Otherwise, you're going to go nuts. That's almost a very Descartesian, I think therefore I am thing is, it's not that you exist because you can think. It's that has to be a first principle, that the data you get is more or less accurate. And
yeah,
so
well, when you have right. I love this conversation. If you have a stadium full of people, they all didn't have a cosmic ray blast through their cornea.
No,
Or
well, if they had, we'd know because they all have cancer right now. If it was that,
yeah, right. That part too. But so when you have multiple witnesses of something, that really adds to it. An astronaut in space orbiting, in a spacecraft and is seeing something, that could be a lot of different things, for sure. But an anomaly in the eyeball. But let me suggest something to you. This is crazy. And I know I've asked you before if you've ever seen anything in the sky, but just imagine this for a second. And I want you to put your brain hat on. I'm standing with 200 people. This is a true story. I'm standing with 200 people. It's at night, and we're out in the desert, and we're all looking up at the sky. Okay? Looking at the stars, all of us. And at that moment, Isaac, I don't know how much of the sky this shape is. That
was this the big cylinder?
No, that was in Washington. This is in Southern California in the Mojave Desert. So big slice of the sky, this big, right? Whatever this is, up. And off to my right, I see what appears to be, and it's blue, like aquamarine. Something has hit its high beams. That's what it looks like. And it's traveling this way past us. But it goes blip, 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 like it's flicking its high beams. And I see it, and we all do. And in a matter of about, the whole event was about 2 seconds. And it wasn't very high. If I was going to guess, I'd say a mile, maybe 5,000 feet.
Nighttime. Because
you could see it. Yeah. And it's green. Anyway, so it shoots across, stops, cuts down, and then continues and does a backwards Zorro Z slash. Sa, sa, sa. And then as it leaves, it hits its I beams again and disappears. Now, not a meteor. It was about a second. I don't think it was a second and a half. The whole thing was like, what, gone. All right. So high beams, down, gone. High beam flash and is gone. 200 people screamed. I did too. It was incredible to see. Now, explain to me what we just saw.
A meteor.
Not a meteor. It's not a comet. It's not a rocket. It's not, SpaceX wasn't even flying that.
Without seeing myself, without having because I could have been there right there with you and seen the same thing and not have been able to tell what exactly it would have been very easily. But I'll give you an example. Let's say it was a meteor. Meteors pop when they start coming in the atmosphere, and you'll get other ones, like a big chunk of it might fall.
But they go in a straight line. They don't stop, zigzag down, and then shoot off and continue at the same speed.
Well, let's say it was going in like this and it popped. And that's where you got to see it. And the other pieces start falling down, but it hadn't gotten hot yet.
No. That's not what we saw. You're not hearing me. What it did was this. Zut, zut, zut. That's what it did. Nothing more. That was the path that it took. Nothing dropped off of it. There was no sparks. It was an aquamarine glowing ball of light that did its flight path like I just described to you. So when you see something like that, you just go, well, something, I don't know what, Isaac, I'm not telling you it's ET. I'm just telling you that's what we saw.
Sure. And it could have been ET. Again, I don't like when it comes to things like the Fermi Paradox. I tell people there's two things that make sense to me. One is that aliens don't exist, and two is that they do and visit us. Because they'll say things like, well, okay, all planets this boring Blackwood blue planet that nobody cares about. And that's fun. I like that from Douglas Adams, a great quote, but it's not true. We go, Oklahoma's boring. We go visit Oklahoma all the time. Nobody in Oklahoma, even the most remote town, is like, I don't think there's an outside world because no one's ever visited. People visit. So if aliens exist and can get here, they do. That's pretty much the conclusion one draws from that. And whether we're talking about from deep space or from other realities, that's what happens. It could have been military technology. It could have been another country's technology. It could have been some weird drone. It could be that some corporations got some fun new technology they're trying to perfect, but they don't want people to know about. All those options are potentially real. Without actually knowing more, we can't say what it is. But for people seeing it, should I say, go get your eyes checked? Well, you can go get your eyes checked, but 200 people saw it. It's very unlikely there's anything going to come up from that. 200 people saw a thing. Now, could they have done, they always say, well, a whole bunch of us saw it and we talk about it and we start seeing the same thing, we didn't. That can happen too. And again, I wasn't there, so I can't say. Was it a phenomena? Yes, by definition, absolutely. Was it otherworldly? It would scare the heck out of me if I saw it. So I won't say otherwise. But, we never want to assume that we know how this stuff works. At the same time, you can have some very strange effects. One of the biggest ones is no aircraft could possibly have made that maneuver. And it gets too sharp, things like that. But there's limitations on that because a lot of things could make that kind of maneuver. It doesn't have to be moving on what we think of as a survivable track record for a pilot because we got drones. We got not just the little quadcopter things. You could have some missile that went off like that fired something else off the side. As an example, I just want to make that exact shape, right? I take a missile, it fires some kind of gun projectile downwards at itself, and then that thing fires another one off that in the same direction. I don't know why you would ever build that. Maybe that's a anti-aircraft type gun style thing you were testing, but you could do it if you want to. I don't know why you would, but you could. So we can't say it's not physically possible for us to do. That doesn't mean we did it either, though. So.
Yeah. I like the way, your brain works. And when you hear somebody like me describe this event, then you have to apply, your thought, your training, and your knowledge, your education to that to come up with, your brain is trying to, explain it and come up with some ideas. When you're standing there and you see it for yourself, when your brain is used to everything in this world where it simplifies your environment, I don't have to look at the stuff that's on my walls here. My brain knows what's there. It doesn't waste time thinking about that, right?
A lot of your brain is designed to edit out stuff you don't need to care about.
You don't need to care about that stuff, and so, but when your brain sees something that is new, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. And that's what this was. That's what this was. And I again, I can't explain it, but here's the thing. I think the skeptics and the debunkers out there, the Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world, where they had plenty of ammunition to deal with this subject in the past to just poo-poo these ideas. One, there were no exoplanets, right? And so we had that going on. The Fermi Paradox, and if you go back to Copernicus, that was a ceiling of stars. They never thought that there were stars. There was no stars behind the stars. But not until guys like Herschel in 1920, and certainly Hubble, in 1932, and what he absolutely flipped everything over. But that's all. Yeah, that's all one lifetime ago. Yeah. This is all recent history. Now today, we understand much more the vastness of the universe and galaxies and how much stuff is out there, that it's not a question of, are we alone? We're certainly not alone. That's a mathematical impossibility.
We don't know what the math is, so we can't say for sure. But
what's that?
Well, we don't know what the real math is. As an example, humans make up maybe, I don't know, a quintillionth or maybe a higher fraction of the actual mass on this planet. There's nothing living unless they 1 meter beneath the ground, maybe a few lithivores a little bit deeper than that. Most of Earth is dead. And it's, well, okay, that's a big deal. So most of the solar system is even deader. But you say, what percentage of matter has actually ever been a brain? And it's very tiny just for Earth alone, let alone this solar system. We don't want to take too much for granted with the numbers, because when we look at something like Drake's equation and say, well, 1 out of 10 systems have a planet, 1 out of 10 of them has a habitable one, and it starts making it seem like the rest of those should be 1 out of 10, 1 out of hundreds too, but they could all be lottery odds. It could be that going from having no brain at all to having a sophisticated one might be something that happens on 1 in a trillion planets. It could be that complex life, just getting to the multicellular level is something that happens so rarely, probably not that one because it happened on Earth repeatedly, but something that happens so rarely that we're the only planet in the galaxy that has it, and the rest are all covered in lichen, and that could be the real case. We don't know.
Okay, except, yes. And now that's the extreme.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're on this end of the bell curve with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. I understand that. But then we have a problem. And that problem is the asteroid Bennu. What was found on the asteroid Bennu, Isaac? I'm not going
You're going to have to tell me, because I'm
not going to throw you under the bus. Yeah. Let me tell you, we scooped up, right?
Oh, that was the Osiris Rex, wasn't it?
Right,
yeah.
Right. So what did we find there? What did we find? Well, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you what we found. We found 20 of the 22 fundamental amino acids and sugars of RNA in that soil.
Sure.
We found all five, not 6 of 5, all 5 fundamental proteins of DNA on that asteroid floating around in the vacuum of space. Now, so that right there says to me that friggin' life is everywhere. And that is just one asteroid.
But as we think that stuff tends to form naturally in nebula, like we found formaldehyde I want to say back in the 1950s, just floating around in nebula. And
that's formaldehyde. I'm talking about RNA and DNA, the stuff that makes you and me laugh.
Finding amino acids or finding base types isn't the same as finding, DNA strand. Finding a bunch of Lego blocks not the same as finding a computer.
It's the fundamental components to create all of that stuff of RNA and DNA. That's not a coincidence. And if that bounces onto a planet with water, the rest is history, man. You're just stirring a soup.
And panspermia is still one of the better, like right now, for years we said it's probably the deep sea thermal vents that was life. Before that was the tidal pools. We've heard some dense phosphorus lakes as an option too, but panspermia has been one of the 2 or 3 best ones for a while. That life tends to pop up on comets in its most basic form. Those land on planets in some late bombardment phase, and that's where life comes. That's fine.
Poof. Well, you said earlier, I think you were being facetious, that Earth is basically a dead planet, but because
thin skin of life on a big old hot ball of radioactive uranium.
Yeah. But we can't stop life here. Mm-hmm. Lord knows we've tried, right? We've tried a lot, and we've had 5, 6 major extinction events
at least.
Yeah, and we can't stop life after a forest fire. We've got nothing but black hills here in California.
Themselves by forest fires.
It's so true. Yeah. But next spring, here it comes. All those hills are covered with not only vegetation, but probably new species of vegetation too. As well.
Possibly,
yeah.
Life is sturdy stuff. It's got a lot of practice at. It's got a lot of practice at not dying. What's got is a lot of practice at dying, and the ones that managed not to a couple of times have improved things. But we could extinguish all life on Earth if we put our minds to it. I don't know why you would, and try to really hard, right? If you just had the entire economy turned over to building nuclear bombs, but even then, it's like, well, you have to blow it off the deep oceans because you got life down the Marianas Trench that looks more alien than anything you see in a sci-fi film. And those things are weird too, and that tells you that's that's an environment that's farther away from surface life on Earth than parts of Venus or Mars are.
Yeah,
So
they breathe sulfur instead of oxygen. Or what? I'm making stuff up, but
but I mean, you could have that as an option. Oxygen is not what anybody breathed originally on this planet, and we're on at least our third atmosphere for this planet, from what we can tell. There's no idea how many of them got blown off where we got the Theia event that created the moon, and that we think it created the moon. I should always caveat on that. Leading theory does not equate to absolute fact, but we go through these atmospheres; they change over time, and even the salinity oceans, we thought had been building up over the eons. It looks like it might have been higher in the past too. Like it might have been as high as 7% at times. And those are huge changes, and life had to adapt to all that stuff that would kill us right away. It had time. These things didn't usually happen overnight, but so the dinosaurs now, we don't think it was so much the asteroid as the creation of the Himalayas. It changed the entire climate while that continent was ramming to another continent. And you think about how crazy an event that must have been to be living through, is the creation of a whole mountain range. And that changes the climate while it's happening. And it might have been what killed the dinosaurs off more than that asteroid did.
Why is it today that I can go and listen to a couple of physicists talk, all right, sit and do their thing, and these conversations in books too, it's not just that, and the conversation in pretty freely, there's a lot of conversation about faster than light travel, and that physicists today are okay, talking about aliens. I think it's a numbers thing. The numbers are.
I think everyone was really stodgy and didn't want to get themselves kicked out of professional. I always hated
right. But why do you think
I am as skeptical as they get, and I always loathe that about we can't have a serious conversation about this thing that we all think might be the case anyway. But
you built a career. You're the rock star of alien colonization. You are the rock star of ET life. You're the rock star of Little Green Men. But yet you haven't seen anything in the sky, and you don't think they visited here.
I've seen weird stuff like anybody else, but I always assumed it was something more mundane. And at the same time, I'm a very skeptical person on it. I love talking about it anyway because I love sci-fi. And I think the problem was that I always thought it was wrong that we couldn't have conversations about it. Doesn't mean it was, but it was like in the 80s and 90s. Just bringing the topic up would get you laughed off the stage.
Oh, for
that
sure.
Never been. It was horrible. It was because it was intellectually designed. So that's how you do science. Doesn't mean you have to jump on every X-Files episode as though that's the facts. But at the same time, you don't treat people that way and expect to get to the truth. And
but back to my original question. Why is everybody thinking about FTL, faster than light travel?
No, I don't know. That's a new thing. They've been thinking about that.
No, it's not a new thing, but now it's just like everybody is trying to get a piece of this pie.
I don't know. I mean, it hasn't been as much in my own circle as I tend to be. Again, National Space Society focuses all on local, what can we do with Moon? What can we do with Mars? Can we send some of the Alpha Centauri? You can look at warp drives without Cuvier, for instance, and say that's a nice paper to write it up on, but it requires things we don't know that even exist to actually make it work. I think space is more on people's minds. And I think it's more okay to talk about topics that were taboo as not serious, topics in the past, because people have let the starch out of their shorts a bit and decide it's okay to actually explore these ideas, and that's as it should be. I haven't seen anything to change my own skepticism about FTL being possible, though, either. I don't see it in the cards, but at the same time, should it be a conversation? Yeah, if we could make that work. It seems like a perpetual motion machine. Obviously, you don't want to have some people going around with scams, but if you look at things that we should be working on doing, radical life extension, I still don't know why people are skeptical about that. Fast night travel, perpetual motion machines, or other energy sources. Those should absolutely be things you're trying to research if you can. Not to waste money on a project where you ain't got no leads, but if you got even a slightest hint that you might be able to make that as work, you should be pursuing them as hard as you possibly can, because they're the most important things you can get if you can get them to work. And
now, you just, we're going to take a break here. I saw a post. Were you just appointed in a space research what was the ceremony for?
Oh, I was the ceremony.
Oh, well, I saw pictures of you.
It was my Facebook page.
What, Isaac? I'm asking you. What were you appointed to? It had something
I
to do with
I was
space.
reelected to president of the National Space Society. So I was.
Yeah.
That's-
God, man, congratulations.
So thank you. It's a second 2-year term, and it's a great honor. It really is. It's awesome.
That's amazing.
And I think my favorite part, because I posted, I was on my Facebook page, was and last one. We do this International Space Development Conference every summer, and this one's in Orlando, Florida, in June for those who want to come. And we always have these student contests. We get like 30,000 students around the world who will design space stations, and the finalists get to come to the event if they want to and show them what their posts are. And we have a lot of serious talks about deep science topics of rocketry, and I like those. But my favorite bits are actually getting to meet all those like high school students and their really cool space station designs. And so that one was always awesome.
Let's take our break right here. Isaac, stay right there. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, tonight. Isaac Arthur is with us. Now, you like it? I think I called, what did I call this show? ET Megastructures? Haven't talked about it once. Maybe we will after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black T-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 T-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black T-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. Today we're headed to Bolivia, Tiwanaku, Peru, and of course, Pumapunku. Brian, exciting. Thank you so much for everything, my friend.
Always an honor. Right behind us is the sacred river of the Inca that goes past Machu Picchu. So we're going to be driving up to its source at 15,000 feet above sea level and then down to Lake Titicaca.
So today we hit 15,000 feet.
Yes.
Crazy. And you can do it with us. All you have to do is go to hiddenincatours.com. Simple. We've got 2 tours coming up next year, one in June for the summer solstice, right? And then another one right here in November. So hiddenincatours.com. Come and hang out with Brian and I and his amazing team.
Right on.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again,
rivermoonwellness.com.
All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Isaac Arthur is back with us. Isaac is somebody that, let me tell you really quick before I bring Isaac back in. This is many, many years ago. And Isaac was getting started, but I stumbled upon his work. And I'm looking at the videos, I'm listening to his research, and I thought to myself, this is my guy. This guy right here. He thinks like I do. I am shocked that something this well done is being presented to the world. There's a huge future in front of him. And I reached out. And we have since then, of course, as everybody knows, become really good friends. But what you need to do is you need to go to Future Science with Isaac Arthur and get your rabbit hole on. There is so much information there on just about any subject, and it's how he explores it and how far he goes into this. It's absolutely amazing, and it's so good, Isaac, to have you back on the show, man.
Always great to be on.
Yeah, it's just an amazing conversation, and as they all have been in the past. So let's get into some megastructures for a second. I remember, now I just brought up Future Science 1.0 with Isaac Arthur and how you approach stuff back then, and you have evolved in your thought process since then. But one of the things that you have explored a lot is alien megastructures and the colonization of galaxies, and if you get to one point, how quickly things can propagate. And you have done, and then you take that and expand on those thoughts, and then take those thoughts and expand. It's a fascinating subject. But back then, when I first brought you on, and you and I first started talking, there was no James Webb.
No.
Right?
It was in a holding pattern.
Yeah. And now, today, with everything that you have presented as thought and theory and ideas, it seems that every project, not every, but pretty close, all of the big projects at NASA and ESA that are launching are space-based systems to search out and seek out alien life in any form that they can do it right now. And it's an exciting time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what's your reaction going to be when we have one of these deep space-based telescopes? We've got one that's about to orbit like Hubble, that's going to be around the sun, scoping out the night sky, specifically looking for habitable planets, right? This is like crazy that we're at this point in history. What are you going to do? What's your reaction going to be when we find an alien megastructure surrounding a planet or a star?
Well, if
what's your reaction going to be? Are you going to be no? Are you going to go, I told you so? Because you have the right. You have the right to do that. But what's your reaction going to be?
Well, okay. I'm also, because I'm such a skeptic, I don't have to eat my hat for us, so I don't get to tell anybody I told you so. If they find the Vega structures one of the ones I talk about, they're going to say, aha, they did build these things just like I thought they were. But then I'll have been invited about one thing and wrong about so many other ones that I am really not going to be in a position to have much of a victory celebration on that. But if we found an alien megastructure around there, I'd actually get worried. If we found one, it's like, there it is. Because your first thought is, what is wrong with our logic and our reasoning on this? That either A, they didn't survive and that thing's just sitting there, which is possible, right? Maybe it's some zombie AI that's just keeping things built by their civilization is dead. Or space travel is so hard they can't leave their own solar system. We think that building some gigantic megastructures in space is harder than going to the solar system. It's not. We'll probably have millions of space stations and space habitats here before we've colonized very many planets, because the one's much easier to build and cheaper to build. And if you look at it, you find, my God, here's a solar system full of space habitats or other megastructures. We know what they are. And then you look at the nearby solar systems, you don't see anything at all. You say either A, they died off before they could actually do much, but somehow the things are still there. Maybe they're automated repair systems, which they well might be. Or B, this space travel thing turned out to be so much harder than we thought it was going to be. And at that point, is one of the other Fermi Paradox options called an interdiction bubble civilization. They say, we just don't want to have, space travel is hard. We can do it with automated robots, but colonizing is hard. And right now, we don't have any enemies around us because it's hundreds of light years near civilization. But if we colonize all those planets around us, now we have enemies on every side of us. And pretty soon, just because it takes so long to travel back and forth, these people aren't our siblings anymore, our colony. They are mutant cousins of ours who might invade us. Now we're surrounded by potential enemies. And even if our relations with 99% of them are good, there's still one that isn't. So they might intentionally not want to colonize very far from their home. They might even mine the places out to make it hard for anyone to get root there, just to prevent having enemies around them. That's one scenario for what might happen with a civilization. And so if we found an alien megastructure like that, the first thing we have to assume is, what was wrong with our thinking? What about the idea of let's grow and settle and colonize? What was wrong with that idea? What made that impossible or undesirable? Because if they can build stuff like that, if we did find that and we found it near us, and we probably would have to be pretty near us to see it, that means that all of our Star Trek-y notions of going out and settling and exploring strange new worlds is probably wrong. And so I would be scared to some degree if I saw that, because to me, I always see this glorious future of space development ahead of us, world after world after world. And if you find something like that around another planet, it tells you something about that idea didn't work.
Okay, so if we look at, I'm just going to pull up the number 5 billion, because Earth is 4.5 billion, and that's a good basis of things. But we are on the back end of the age of the universe.
Yeah.
Right. So we're on the last third. And so if that's the case, then we have around 10 billion years of star system and galaxy development that is behind us.
Mm-hmm.
That is the really, really, really scary part, because you just mentioned 300 years of science, 400 years of practical science. I guess you're basing it on Galileo, which is that's fair. Okay, it's a fair. I use the same one. What is that in 5 billion years in our section of the age of everything, right? Mm-hmm. The idea of finding something abandoned or sitting out there is probable. Mm-hmm. It's not possible. It's probable, and it's there. We just haven't found it yet.
If there were civilizations in this galaxy and they got, at least a century ahead of where we are now, if they got all that great automation, space technology that I talk about, and I don't talk about like sci-fi. For me, that stuff is a century out tops, right? If you can do that stuff, then you should be leaving footprints behind, and they should be all over the place. And that is one of the problems that they're not.
I know. I agree with that. But here's the problem, that I agree with that, right? But my objective side backs up and says, what's the footprint we've left behind so far?
Not much of one.
Voyager, right? Voyager 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm. Well, the stuff that's sitting on the moon will probably be visible there for, I don't know, maybe even 1 million years, maybe. It slowly picks up dust. That stuff attracts dust. It would get buried faster than we expect. It might get micrometeor in the ground, but the Apollo sites might be visible. And again, only really if you wouldn't stumble across them, because all the reflectors and things would get covered with grit. Not long. And like the Silurian hypothesis of how long would we actually see remnants of human civilization afterward. You don't see anything in the ocean floors that's more than 200 million years old because it rolled into the mantle. But on Earth, we would leave a print. There would be all those things we come across would say, this field is surprisingly right-angly, right? These rocks are very right-angly. They might last for a long time. Like the pyramid is probably very different in appearance than was at its prime, probably much prettier at that time, but it's still there. It's going to be there for a long time. But how long is a long time? A million years? 10 million? Things can disappear over time, and space is not, you think the vacuum of space preserves things pretty well in some ways, but also space is not empty. Space is full of horrible amounts of radiation and dangerous bullets and micrometeors all the time. Things will not stick around in space indefinitely. And, they get knocked around, thrown onto our orbits, or toss them into something's orbital path where they get absorbed and fall into it. Things like that will happen. So we don't really know how long these things would last. If they were self-repairing, though, they might last billions of years. But if they're not, I don't know. You could have a population pop up in this galaxy every 100,000 years, last for 1 million years where it was at, and still not have any of them ever hear from each other if they didn't expand outward. Everything is based on the idea that they expand.
Yeah, and I like that. But if we just take our own history, we brought up Galileo, we brought up Copernicus, Tycho Brahe, and we on and on, right? These things where and even going before Galileo, what was at the center of the universe. But things slowly changed in what we understood. And that so once we found out that nebula were galaxies, right? These smudges like Zeta Reticuli is a great example of that. Andromeda. Yeah, Andromeda. I said Zeta Reticuli. Andromeda is a great example of that, where it was a smudge. We thought it was gas. Yeah. Right. Turns out to be how many times bigger than our own Milky Way?
It turns out I think we're actually about the same mass now because it's brighter than us, though. It might have had a more recent star formation curve, but yeah, it's us and the Milky and the Andromeda, and we're like 90% of the mass of like the 30 galaxies right nearby us too.
Yeah. Which okay, but that's my point. Where now we're counting galaxies in the universe instead of stars in the night sky.
It's
right.
Insane how big things are.
Right. We're now 30 years ago. I keep bringing this up, but the point is a simple one. We had no exoplanets. Now, every day we catalog another exoplanet or 10 every day.
If we catch up that rate, it would still take us 1 million years to even scratch how many are in the galaxy.
So
we have to get fast. We discover them 1,000 at a time. It actually
it's going to happen, but it's going to happen with megastructures.
Yeah,
it's going to happen with ET. We're going to find the first one, and we're going to figure out how to do it, like we did with galaxies, and like we did before that with stars, and then suddenly we're going to discover one after another, and it's not going to be a big deal.
If they're
exoplanets are not a big deal today,
and we'll find
it.
Yeah, that's insane. How many of them there are? You think about like the Pluto debate, and Pluto is still a planet, it's a dwarf planet, same as Jupiter is a giant planet. But people forget we started finding other ones in our own solar system at that point. So was either you want to memorize other 20 planets, and yet now it seems like such small beer because it's like, well, you got these thousands and thousands of planets nearby, and yet at the same time it's easier to forget in this solar system we have 1 million planets. They're minor planets, but they're still pretty big. It's like, well, this thing that's the size of a state probably should qualify as something worthy of note. And there's so much just in our solar system alone that we could spread around and colonize that it really is like 1 million worlds.
Do you know how many moons they found last week?
It was Saturn. Like a ton around Saturn. Saturn's got the new record again too, but I was a kid. It was
132 new moons.
It was 16. And that was the big discovery, right? When
64 of them now have names.
But does anyone remember what they are?
One of them. What's
not surprising though, because it's deeper out than Jupiter is. There's a lot of rocks there. They collected by, and there's not much to perturb them. we might find more. We might find more around Uranus and Neptune. I'm sure we'll find more planets in the solar system, not necessarily big, cool ones, but they'll be out there. There's so
when
much.
I look at Jupiter with my telescope or Saturn, and you look at the moons, and you can see it too because they're on a plane, right? And you can see it's a mini star system.
Yep, they are mini solar systems. And in a lot of cases, there'll be very literal solar systems too. You get to the place like binary systems. You'll have some red dwarf with its own cluster of planets around it that orbits some big or O-type star, whatever it is. Probably not an O-type, would be dead, but you get these things, and these will be mini empires in the future. We will eventually go out and sell these, I hope. And some place like Jupiter is going to have its 100 moon worlds around it that people watch grow into being the next America, the next Canada, the next new founded place that grows huge. And you'll see the same around Saturn. All these places will go from being some moon we didn't even know existed a couple of years ago to in 1,000 years, someplace you can go visit for the price that would be like going to Europe right now to fly across the seas to. And there'll be a settlement there. And assuming there's still people around at all at that point in time, you can go tan on the moons of Jupiter or something like that. On the radiation glow.
If you had the opportunity, let's say SETI intercepts a signal and we send a signal back, they ask us a question, or you have the opportunity as Isaac Arthur to ask a question, what would that question be to ET? You got one
question. Without making the Douglas Adams joke about what's the answer to life, the universe, and everything, I'd probably ask them, who else is nearby?
That's a good one.
Because, like, if they land on the planet, the first question is, what have you been doing the last century? Because if they land here, then you know that, I mean, it doesn't mean every sighting is real, but you got to say, we've been spotting you guys for last century.
Have you been here before? Yeah.
And why won't you, what were you doing here that took you that long?
But you would want to know, that's a really good question. Who is nearby?
Yeah.
Who else have you talked to? Yeah, that's a good one. You know what my question would be? How'd you do it? How'd you survive?
Yeah, it's a good question to ask. So, I think about when people ask me what technology I most want to see get invented in my lifetime, and I always tell them radical life extension technology.
Yeah.
So solve that one first. How do I keep going?
Well, I think that every civilization would have to figure out how to get out of their own way first. Not ET or whatever, but you got to figure out how to avert an asteroid collision or a comet. You're going to figure that out. That's a logistical problem.
So high-tech civilization, an asteroid coming to your planet is a crisis only because you got an economic fluctuation in the value of gold, all that free metal coming at your planet. They're not worried about hitting them. They're going to grab it and turn it into stuff.
That's right. So you're going to overcome that. But how did you get out of your own way?
Yeah.
How did you survive so you could evolve? That would be my question, because that's the advice we need. Right. I don't care about curing cancer or climate change. I don't give a shit.
And why would we ask an alien how to cure cancer?
Yeah, that's my point. Right. No. How do we survive? How do we get out of our own way? How do we get over that hump so we can move on?
There's always the goal with any question you get to ask on the first one. I spent a lot of time thinking about this is what's the answer going to tell you? And if they say nobody else is around, then you got to consider the possibility that they are lying. And they say, because normally, like if let's say you randomly pop you up like that, the first people who meet you say, well, who else could we talk to? No, it's just me.
Yeah, it's just me.
We're just talking right now. Nobody else is nearby. And one advantage you have is people will watch things like this and they say, well, why don't the aliens just wipe us out? And I say, well, maybe they could. It's not like they wouldn't be able to. It's just, why doesn't the United States wipe out Monaco? One, it doesn't have any real reason to. And two, it's not the only player on the planet, right? You've got all these other countries, some weaker, some stronger, whatever it is, who are going to pay attention. Space rises with the cube, which means you've got a volume 10 times bigger. It's got 1,000 times more stars in it. So you got 100 light years near civilization. then that means when you go out to 1,000 light years, there's going to be 1,000 civilizations there, give or take. That's how the math plays out on that, if they're randomly popping up, right? And now it's not, well, why? It's not them versus us. It's who else is going to get involved. Plus, if they got colonies, or they got the ability to travel through space, what makes you think they're colonies of all their friends? You know, what makes you think they're in the home system all gets along? But if you talk to them and they say, oh, there's nobody else here, then unless that's a couple of explanation, like because we wiped them all out, because the answer might be that. It's like, no, we're the only game in town, promise. I say, oh, there's no one else who wants to talk to you, but don't worry, you won't have long to worry about that. The fleet's coming, and we look forward to sending you to your next life. You don't know what they're going to come up with as the answer to that, but it will tell you something. Same as if you ask them, they land here and say, well, what were you doing here last century? And you say, well, this is our first time here. Say, okay, you're lying to me. But if you said, well, we've got sightings for a century, their natural reaction should be, there have been. Now we're curious about this. Who's been screwing around our territory or something like that? So you get that extra piece of answer. When you get a signal from an alien of any kind, the first thing it tells you is they're trying to talk to you, right? And that's so even if you don't know what they're saying, you know something. Someone is there, and they want to speak at you because no one's going to do a big wide broadcast. They aimed at your planet, and there are things you can pick up. And if I'm sending a signal to an alien planet, I'm going to encode in there the equivalent of 365 and 24. Because I know how long their planet takes to rotate around their sun, and I know how long it takes to spin. I'm going to take that divisor and send it to them because that tells them I'm knocking on their door specifically.
Right.
I want them to respond. If you just send out a big wide message, they're going to argue about whether or not they should be safe to respond or not. It might be a trap. If you go up and knock on someone's window and wave at them the dining room table,
I know exactly where you are.
And that's you are telling them this planet. We know where you are. We know how long your day is. We got your number, right? And at that point in time,
they have to reply to that email. Yeah, they do. They have to.
You can't hide the corner when someone's like, "I don't, Steve, we're not there." Ignore me.
You did so much. I encourage everybody to go check out Isaac's stuff. But you did a lot of stuff about colonizing and how quickly it could potentially happen.
Yeah.
And I remember I don't remember the specific math, but it was an alarming low number of time, a very small amount of time that it would take to populate every planet in the Milky Way.
Yeah.
Once you got to a certain point. Now, here's the thing with that. Did you consider sex? You have to reproduce. Mm-hmm. Do you go now? Are you reproducing in factories, or are you still depending on the old-fashioned way?
Well, let's say we're doing it the old-fashioned way, and because you can do it faster with factories you want. People say, well, maybe people don't want to have kids anymore. You get decent enough AI that can do a lot of raising your kids if you need to. You might be pumping them out through cloning tanks if you need to, but you don't really need to for space, because if it takes you a century to get the nearest star system, and you got, I don't know, healthy adults on board a spaceship with nothing to do but repair that spaceship and wait a century, I feel like families are probably going to pop up. And if you're doubling every generation, call it 4 generations there, then you have, 2, 4, 8, 16 times as many people. I'm sorry, I had to do my fingers. It's late, but so you got 16 times as many people, and that's to get the nearest star system. When you get there, it took you 100 years to get there. You say, well, we have 16 times more people than we need for this mission. And we don't really need a spaceship anymore. And a lot of us grew up on this spaceship. And why don't we just refuel its fusion fuel, help the folks get set up here, and move on to the next planet? We'll drop half the population off, and so they use the other half to maybe build another ship and expand this one and send out to the next system. Then after a few times doing that, you're springing out there, leapfrogging, you just divide the fleet. And you keep building more ships as you go. You do it that way. And I call that a Gardner ship or a Gardner fleet. Every century or so, you arrive at a new system, because that's how long it takes to get these things. And maybe you bypass them, and you just divide the fleet up. Some stay, some jump on board the original fleet, some help build a new fleet. And you just keep doing that. And while you're on the way, you refuel on raw materials and build as you go. And that will get you to the edge of the galaxy at whatever speed it is your ships travel at. If it's 10% of light speed, which is plausible, right? Then you're getting to the edge of the galaxy in anywhere between 350,000 years to the other side in 1 million. And every time you do that, those worlds within 1,000 years are pretty populated. So, on the galactic map, they ought to get up to the Earth level population on those planets, just, a tiny, tiny way behind the fleet. And when you get to the edge of it, every planet's colonized. You probably already have Dyson swarms around after things too. So you have the whole galaxy colonized in less time than it's been since we discovered fire. A lot less time, probably.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. And so, you put your Fermi hat on and you go, okay, well, if that's possible, how come we haven't seen it yet?
Right.
And I would say we constantly have, our evidence is one. What's our measurement? Well, we got Earth and us. Right?
Yep.
And we always
large sample.
That's it. And we always think in terms of our technology right now. And I get that because that's what we understand.
Yeah.
But that would mean that we imagine us looking for what we know that would be traveling between the stars. If they're traveling in a way that doesn't have a burning candle on the back of it, right, or some kind of trace, or it's not in motion, that there's something else, then we wouldn't see any evidence of interstellar trade routes or vacation ships or whatever it may be.
The ability to colonize a galaxy doesn't mean you have a lot of trade either. One of the reasons I like the Gardner approach, it means the last system near you was settled by the same folks. So you can have some back and forth trade or people wanting to go back to Earth that way. But let's say you're sending one spaceship a year out from some system, I think, big, bigger than the aircraft carrier, a ship carrying 1 million folks. You're not going to see that. Now, you would have approached our solar system. If you got something that big as a ship accelerating down from even a fraction of light speed, it's going to light the sky up like a new star as it comes to the system. That's the kind of energy involved, but only if it's in the visible range. Fusion reactor wouldn't be giving off visible range. It'd be gamma or something like that. But it's safe, like you're using micro black holes, Hawking radiation ship drive. That's a nice option, but that'd be something you could spot if you know to look for it. And you have to know to look for it and kind of where to be looking for it. And we don't know that you would have much trade or contact between planets you settled. You don't have to have a civilization to settle a galaxy any more than the folks leaving Ethiopia or wherever they're saying life originated out of for humans was having conversations with the guys in the Bering Strait before they crossed over to North America. Those folks were not chatting. They didn't call home to get conversational advice on how best to do this thing. They didn't even know each other existed by that point. It's just a slow out-rolling process. We don't know how you would colonize with a technology we don't even know exists yet. If they have something like the Slido's example we had for the multiverse, the answer, they don't colonize anything. They colonize those planets. Let's say that we invent a super intelligent AI and Vortex style in about 10 minutes, it figures out how to create an infinite energy supply and either pops away to another universe or it says, well, I'm just going to stay right here. I don't need your planet. I don't need your resource. I don't need your energy. I've got better than that. It's not worth my time to collect them. And that's what happens to civilizations. There's just a tiny little dot somewhere that you don't find unless you go to that planet. It's just there. And you're never going to see that because it just went into a genuine singularity of the more literal kind. They got infinite power on the inside of this pocket universe they made. That could be what happens. If you learn how to play with space-time at a fundamental level, why screw around trying to get the dregs from the universe, going and colonizing deserts when you got 4-tile river valleys sitting in front of you? And so that's always option two. I hold the idea that if our current idea of known science works out, then that galaxy gets colonized that way. And I push that point because I want people to know that you don't need the Star Trek technology to make it happen. We can do this with technology we have right now. Not very well, but we could make it happen. That doesn't mean that we don't get those other technologies. And if we do, it can change the landscape so fast. You get the ability to play with entropy, right? Well, you can't hide your civilization in the first place. You say, well, you want to hide. You don't hide because you have radio waves leaving your planet. So they're not going to try to hide. But maybe I'm wrong about that. You got those radio waves that left your planet. You can't go back in time and block those unless maybe you can. Maybe you get a time machine. You go back and tweak off those little antennas. We don't know what technology we don't have yet. And because of that, we can't say what they can or cannot do. But it's the same concept. We can't always sit around saying, well, there's so much stuff we don't know. Well, that's good. Let's work with what we do know. And so that's what we do for now. And I think that we'll find a lot of new stuff, but I don't know that we're going to find a whole lot of new phenomena at this point. We'll see.
With this is probably going to take up the rest of the show, but there are two considerations right now that are being discussed. I brought up faster than light, and right now, and I never thought that we would get here. It seems that everything that we have known and collected about the universe is wrong. With the discoveries right now that are happening, especially with the latest announcement that that dark matter is slowing down. I mean,
Dark energy?
Dark energy slowing down. That was, I mean, just when we got used to the idea.
Speeding up.
Yeah. Just, and the math was working too. That was the thing. The math was, but anyway, and now the question of the Big Bang and did that actually happen, and what, and for how many years now? What was before the Big Bang? Nothing.
You mean before the Big Bang theory or before the Big Bang?
Before the Big Bang. And we were solid. We started to accept that, and now there is discussion, a serious discussion about what existed before the Big Bang and so forth. But faster than light. Okay. And before the Big Bang, time is an interesting thing here where, okay, so infinite mass, you reach the speed of light, time stands still. What happens when you go faster?
Time goes backwards.
Theoretically.
According to the math, right? Math is not physics. And a lot of times we found things that we thought were going to be the case from the math, and they did not work out in the physical universe that way. It's same as applying pure logic to things. You need that experimental evidence, because I would say this a lot. It's like, well, maybe the universe, nothing existed before the universe. So, well, okay, maybe not. Where would it come from? Almost every perspective on where the universe could be that fits inside the anthropic principle requires there to be a higher layer of reality. You either have multiverses, you have some primordial universe that sets the stage, and this really kicks with things like the fine-tuned universe idea. For us to be a reality, that means there was so many more universes than we thought there were, that we just have a freak anomaly that lucked out. Or it means there's some fundamental thing that sets the values that allow life to be in where they're at. Or you got the actual course that was created, which is always there. You got the divine ways, you can have a simulation theory version. Those things cannot be ruled out. The one thing that they do need to stop doing, to be honest, though, is saying, well, the universe could have come from nothing because everything would have zeroed out. And we don't have, for instance, negative matter or energy yet. We don't have any proof of such things. But even if you assume they did, the fact that you have a whole bunch of stuff that's negative, a whole bunch of stuff that's positive, that doesn't mean there was nothing there, right? You could have a company that was making zero money, a zero-sum game, as it were, and say, well, that company doesn't exist because it didn't make any money last year. It was exactly zero.
But they had a building.
Yeah, they had people. Right? It seemed to have got a lot done.
Yeah, they had people. Yeah. So, that's a really good metaphor.
Yeah. And
can I use that?
Oh, please steal it freely. Yeah. If I say it, feel free to steal it. So, unless it's wrong.
It's tasty. Well, so if that's the case with faster than light, then does that negate anybody's fanciful ideas of FTL?
No.
If you then travel backwards in time, then you never left on your ship.
Well, there's the one.
Right?
What does something look like when it's traveling back in time? And the answer is it looks a lot like antimatter. But I'll give you an example. We say FTL is not possible, but we need to put a caveat on that. Almost every last thing in this universe is moving away from us faster than the speed of light. The vast majority of the matter
from our perspective.
From our perspective, it's a valid one.
But when you're in that point in space is moving with you. Yes. It's not like stuff is blasting past you at the speed of light.
But if you're trying to go there, you'd have to accelerate really quick. Like if you want to get to a place that's 1 billion light years away, you need to be going more than 7% of light. Well, if you're going more than 7% of light speed, you would. I'd say you're going 8, you'll eventually get there because it is moving way that fast. And that's all limits on colonization at light speeds. You only get, say, 10 billion light years away. Well, the universe is 96 billion wide.
But it's also increasing in speed too, as well.
Yeah.
So you'll
catch it if you're going fast enough.
You're right. See that you're talking like I used to talk. Now you're right. I like where you're going, and I'm talking like you used to talk. How did we both flip flop? We've been abducted by aliens or something. Is your
Absolutely
wife
not.
an alien? Is your
No, she's fun to have conversations with, though. But
this is
I think
getting strange for me. I'm like in the Superman Bizarro world right now.
I've never been a big DC Comics fan, though. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind with anything involving space travel is that until we build a working ship that can go to another star, we cannot make a lot of assumptions about what aliens may or may not be able to do.
Correct.
Once we can, we get the answer to the Fermi Paradox one way or another in the next 1,000 years. And he said, well, that's a long time to wait. He's like, well, we've waited longer. Hell, we've taken that long to build things before. We got cathedrals that took like 800 years. We can do it. We have to be patient. And we might be able to too. Things are going to be really different in 20, 30 years. And not just like, what it was like 20, 30 years ago, back when email was brand new and no one would like to use it. And they thought the CD-ROM tray on their computer, for those of you who remember what CD-ROM trays, was for keeping the coffee in. And then you go back before that, it was Pac-Man was brand new. Things change a lot, but it might change an awful lot more in the next 20 years. Because one thing that really changed a lot is we have almost twice as many people alive right now as when I was born who are doing a lot of thinking. We have way more scientists and way more technologists, and that has an impact. But then you go ahead and start bringing AI online, and maybe suddenly your ability to do research goes up by 10,000, 10 million fold. And things you solve with that are things like, well, how do we get better source of energy? How do we get ways to fix cancer, fix health treatments, extend life? These are possible things to do. There's nothing stopping you under known science from doing them. So those might be the real things. Is the big upside, I say, is it might be 1,000 years before we get an answer to the Fermi Paradox, but you might actually still be alive in 1,000 years to find out.
Yeah.
You're being born today, I'd say your odds are better than 50-50. If you're a kid today, better than 50-50, you're still around in 1,000 years.
Well, and you're going to hear from somebody from the future too. The more that we go forward, the odds of a time traveler from the future coming back because now they have discovered it.
Well, the joke goes, if you invent time travel, what year did time travel get invented? No year in all, because you get it, you can take it anywhere.
That's right. Well, okay, so back to time. We've got 2 minutes of time left. Okay,
it always flies by, doesn't it?
Ship, from our perspective, reaches the speed of light. Time stands still from our perspective.
Sure.
So the beings, if you and I are the pilots on that ship, you and I are.
Yeah, well, we don't feel that way,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
No, but on the deck of the ship, it's still this. Right?
Yep.
We see ourselves as normal.
Yeah.
Only from the observer has it frozen in time.
It would seem like the universe around us was going really fast and getting kind of compressed.
But now we cross and now we go past FTL, right? Or we're now faster than light, I should say, where theoretically time is going backwards. But what happens to you and I observing each other on the deck of the ship? We're not running backwards. It's only backwards to the observer.
Yeah, because we're in the same reference frame, which means the same speed bubble. Time and all that moving the same speed. Everything should be normal to us. I would say,
our watches aren't going backwards.
Yeah, we should hit to the point where all the black holes are all that's left over and exploding, and then we should flip backwards to now-ish. Maybe it's trying to guess what actually happens inside a time going backwards situation is really iffy. I don't think it can happen, but time freezes. There should be factors that would drag you down from the speed of light again, if you could somehow get there. But because photons don't exist forever either, they eventually interact with something. If it's just some virtual particle out of the vacuum foam, but like for instance, we tend to think with the black holes, you could make the argument that they are inside that implosion from the supernova, and time has slowed down so much that you're not seeing the shock wave of them coming back outward. It takes a trillion years for the solar mass sign to actually explode outwards. You can debate that model, but that's one thing that's been argued is basically an implosion that's been slowed down to an insane amount, and it's going to come back out as it engaged in Hawking radiation evaporation. So even in that context where it's been squeezed down to theoretically an infinitely tiny dot, it's still going to pop back up. And that's what we mean, singulators. The numbers don't work well there. The math, the math doesn't work, but the things exist, so the math is probably insufficient. Or they don't exist like we think they do, and the math works fine, but they're not doing what we think they are. We shouldn't assume the Big Bang was from an infinitely tiny dot. It just means the part that we came from might have been an infinitely tiny dot of it. The Big Bang itself might have been the size of a galaxy. And the whole observable universe that we see is the tiny little pixel, that one tiny little grain of sand, that is the current observable universe expanded outward. That's a very realistic and possible option. Right? It could be even bigger than that. Same things for what happened before us in time before this universe existed. We just don't know. And whenever you start touching on infinity or 0 or 1 for that matter, things get weird. We don't know that electrons are weighed the same. We assume they do, but maybe they all just 1 billionth of the amount off from each other. We don't have a way to measure that. We don't know if things actually is 0, and we don't know if things are actually infinite. It's just hard to say. Things to discover.
I love it. I love it. For everybody, Isaac, another great conversation. I look forward to our next one. Future Science with Isaac Arthur. The links are below, isaacarthur.net. We've got the links up over on our website and throughout social media. Go and check out Isaac's work. It's absolutely amazing. Isaac, you crank out a new show every week, full animation and everything else. You guys really do a great job.
Thank you.
Isaac, behave and be well. Go take care of your kids. Say hi to your wife for me. Thank you so much, brother.
Night. Thanks for having me on. Night, everybody.
The absolute best. Isaac Arthur, everybody. isaacarthur.net. The links are below. And tomorrow night here on Fade to Black, Ray Hernandez joins us tomorrow night. And we're going to talk about his latest academic study and the paper that is out, and the ramifications and what has been learned from that. So I will also tomorrow I'm on with Christina Gomez, and full day tomorrow. So Fade to Black breaking news, Christina Gomez, and then Fade to Black tomorrow night, and then I head to Sedona for Rise of the Guardians this weekend. But for now, I'm your host, Jimmy Church. All I've got is Go Back Lee. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.